welcome. This is the first Long Island Technologist Meetup of 2025. Woo! So I'm Justin. I'm always your sprightly host, but today and every other time is really about a host presentation. By the end of today, someone hopefully will volunteer for the next time and give a presentation about something you're passionate about. It's an opportunity to show off your skills, show off your thoughts, maybe bring an idea or two, and really just educate our peers in our time in the sun. So I'm psyched to pass it over to Hunter today. Hunter has been with this organization, been coming to these meetups. I think this is like your sixth time, man. Hunter is an aspiring entrepreneur, an engineer himself, and he's going to tell you a little bit about not only his pursuits, but also the organization that he aims to start. Thanks for being here, Hunter.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool.
So tonight, I'll be presenting on building intelligent AI tools. So a little bit about who I am before I get into the actual crux of the presentation. I'm a CS grad from Binghamton University. I graduated in 2023 cum laude. I recently got an AWS developer associate certification. I like to bridge the gap between theory and practical software development, because there definitely is a gap in my opinion. I have full stack experience. I've built quite a few full stack applications. So why does this topic matter to me? Well, generative AI, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, is reshaping industries, whether we like it or not. So, I believe it's the key to enhancing creativity, productivity, and decision making. So a little bit of my journey as well. So I went from, well, being a CS student to getting into full stack development, and now getting into like full stack development apps with AI. So that's, yeah. So basically how I did that was I really just wanted a bigger challenge than just building like some crud full stack apps. And I recognized that AI is definitely on the rise. This was in like 2023. So I decided to explore it. So I was like researching like ideas, what could possibly like be something practical. And I had a lot of bad ideas, but eventually I landed on an AI assistant for like lyricists to basically write lyrics in music. So what began as a practical, or what began basically as a technical experiment to upskill, really turned into like a product that has real world value or potential. It's still, it's not in production yet. I mean, the website is up. It's called tunetap.io. So let's go over like the basic architecture of a Gen AI SaaS product. Or really, first we gotta go over the architecture of a SaaS product to begin with. So back end, front end. If you're not, who's technical here? Like, who's not technical here? Okay, so a back end is essentially like the functionality. You can think of it in a nutshell. Like, there's a database for data persistency, and there's like the deployment stuff. But then the front end is like the user interface, everything you see on the screen itself. So we want the back end to be scalable and the front end to be intuitive. And then we have large language models, LLMs. If you're not familiar with that term, it's basically like, think ChatGPT, although that's like a website, or Gemini, Claude. So we want to integrate the LLM into our app through APIs, application programming interface. And then we have prompt engineering, big buzzword. A lot of people hate on it, but it's a thing. So we want those prompts to be precise and effective. So an example architecture, since I know AWS and I recently got certified, so the front end could be React, JS. The back end could be like a Lambda serverless type back end with LLM API integration and API gateway. The database could be PostgreSQL on RDS, which is basically a managed AWS database thing for scaling. So static assets could be hosted on S3 and fronted by CloudFront, a content delivering network. And the authentication, since we're using AWS, could be in a Cognito user pool. So there's a little diagram that I drew up quick. So, for anyone interested, this is a little technical, but essentially there's an AWS network and then there's an internet part. We have the client over here, the LLM API that we're going to interface over here. We have S3 hosting the static assets over here, CloudFront, the content delivery network over here, Cognito over here, the API gateway over here. Then we have the VPC. This is specifically for the CRUD APIs. So there's Lambda functions here. And if you don't know what a Lambda function is, just think of it as a server like API, basically a function, function as a service. So, and those, the point of serverless is so that the cloud provider, it's their responsibility to scale it pretty much for the most part, with some caveats. But so we put that in a private subnet for, so that the RDS instance really doesn't have a public IP, and that's best practice for security. And then those can interact with the RDS instance, and then we have non-VPC lambdas, which interact with the LLM API, and that's strategically done so that we don't have to go through a NAT gateway if you're interested in that. But kind of getting carried away. So the basic workflow is like the client gets the static assets through CloudFront and S3, and then it gets the tokens, the authentication tokens from Cognito, and then it passes that through API gateways so it can access the stuff that needs authentication. So yeah, a little getting carried away with that, but let's get into like the core of the presentation. So there are prompts and LLMs. So what is a prompt anyway? It's really just an instruction for the AI to generate specific responses. So how do LLMs work? So in a nutshell, this is like a gross simplification for any AI people. There's basically transformer-based models that predict the next word or token, really token, but you could think of it as a word. So it's trained on like massive data sets. Think of like just any accessible data on the internet, as well as like textbooks, really anything that's digitized. And so they use that data, and they train the transformer-based models with it, and then the outputs that it outputs, depending on your prompt, really depends on the clarity and specificity and context of the actual prompt, and that kind of brings forth like a big limitation that AI doesn't, or Gen AI LLMs don't actually think, but it patterns responses based on statistical probabilities. This is like a big thing that a lot of non-technical people get confused. So I really want you to remember that. So how did the actual data sets get brought together? Well, that's kind of like data engineering in a nutshell. So there's something called an ETL pipeline or ELT pipeline, and so it's extract, transform, load. So you're basically getting all this data from disparate sources, whether that be APIs or web scraping or databases that you have access to, and more. And then they transform it, pre-process it, and get it ready for to be trained on by the actual model. And so yeah, that's that. An analogy here. So LLMs are like chefs creating dishes, outputs based on orders, prompts, following patterns from a massive cookbook training data. So yeah. So yeah, prompt engineering. What even is that? Well, I want you to know when I'm going through this that all of these things do apply to just normal chatbot usage with ChatGPT or something like it, and also programmatically if you're building an app. So best practices is definitely clarity and specificity. Avoid any vague or ambiguous prompts. An example I have is help me write a cover letter. It's not going to give you anything good. Better one will be write the opening paragraph of a cover letter for a front-end engineer role at a startup. Highlight React, TypeScript, and CSS expertise. Still probably not good because it's going to be generic, but it's better than what it was before. Defining a persona. Lots of people like to kind of clown on this one, but it gives it some contextual alignment. So because of how an LLM actually works, that's how that, I can't get into like the actual crux of like how an LLM works, but just know that it does give it some contextual alignment. Um, so an example could be you're a career coach, and then followed up by the task, whatever that task is. So like tailor its resume for a software engineering role, focusing on internships. Uh, and we have length and format control. So um, so to basically make it actionable outputs, so it could be write a 3-sentence cover letter introduction, and it'll roughly do that. Or if you want, it could be like the format could be specified as bullet points or a chart or JSON, anything like that. So few-shot learning for context is also another key thing that really can boost the quality of the outputs. So you could say, so it's basically providing examples to guide the AI. So if an example of this could be preloading customer support replies to train AI chatbots. So you can give some examples, and then it'll learn from those examples in a kind of really dynamic, real-time way. So template, this is just like a general, like kind of combining these together, because you kind of should combine these together if you really want to get a good result. So you are a persona, and then your task is to objective. The response should be in length, whatever. Consider these examples, and then paste the examples. Obviously, depending on the actual model, these things are subject to change. So advanced prompting techniques, just briefly going over this. So these techniques are more for like software development usage, not really for just interacting with a chatbot. But there is this concept of prompt chaining. So you can break a really complicated task into steps. So the output of one step could be the input for the next. And that's essentially how that works. So one could be write a compelling cover letter introduction, and the next could be, with that data passed in, it could be expand on this introduction, adding skills and closing remarks. So this example specifically lacks specificity, but just to get it easy to digest. So using external info. So the supplementary data for domain knowledge. So if the LM actually doesn't know like what you're talking about in this specific domain, then you can have some of these other methods like retrieval augmented generation, RAG, or model fine tuning. So I know specifically RAG uses vector databases. So in a sense, you're kind of vectorizing data, and so there could be some similarity comparison between the vectors, which are like embeddings. Kind of complicated to explain in this presentation, but yeah, in a nutshell, there's some cool things going on with that. And then model fine tuning is also another way, but it actually is like creating an alternative model. RAG is more real-time generation for like retrieving data that is useful to your specific prompt. So, and then we have model chaining. You could also do this. So like you can combine various models together, or even just machine learning like models, not LLMs. So the output of one model could be the input for the next. You can do some really cool stuff. You can like incorporate computer vision along with text, or even audio models together to make some like really cool workflows. And like mentioning all this stuff would be kind of crazy, as I didn't mention LangChain, because it gives you a lot of tools to make this stuff more accessible. So then we have iteration evaluation, something that a lot of people don't even realize is like a thing when it comes to prompt engineering. So you really want to start with a simple prompt and then refine incrementally. So it could be like basically a simple one could be respond to a shipping inquiry, and then they're refined after you test and evaluate. It could be respond to a shipping query politely, including estimated time delivery. So, and then you could use this platform that I found, and it's really the only one that I saw that actually does this. It's called braintrust.dev. So in a sense, what braintrust.dev is, it's basically a framework that you can actually use in your code for like basically test cases and setting up scorers, which could be expected data, expected outputs of test cases, or it could actually be an LLM score. So you could get an LLM to score the output of another LLM if you're doing something really cool that's more like maybe less expected, more dynamic, more weird. So basically, the test cases should be real world diverse examples. Like where's my package if you're doing something with that, or I ordered 2 items but only received 1, and then the metrics you'll get from this based on the score of your function will like track various criteria, whatever that might be is up to you. So it could be tone, coherence, accuracy, adherence to policies, and then monitoring. It actually gives you an analytics like web app where you can look at and compare the actual results of your tests. So you can identify regressions to make sure that the actual changes that you're making to the prompts aren't regressions and they're actually improvements. You can highlight the improvements. You can pinpoint areas needed for refinement. Yeah, that kind of sums that up. Yeah. A lot of big companies are using it because like Vercel, I think, is using it, and like I don't know, a bunch of companies. So lessons from TuneTab.io. So I definitely like realized some things about building TuneTab. So you really want to start by defining your app's objective. If your app doesn't have an objective, like don't build the app. And then you want to know your user base. You want to know the actual people who'll be using your app so that you can actually make features that really make sense. Because for my app, it's for lyricists, so people who write lyrics. So those people should know about music theory. They should generally know how like songs work. It's not just meant for anybody. There's complexity in these things that normal people just don't know. So you need to either include that complexity or don't include it. And the risk of not including it is like for advanced people, it's just going to alienate them. They're going to go, this is garbage. But for if it's too complicated, also it'll alienate beginners. So you don't want to do that either. So you really want to balance the user input in a way that really makes a lot of sense. And this is kind of touching on to like something that's not even software engineering in a way. It's touching on product design, which is something that I have no real education on. I'm a CS guy. So something really cool I learned. You want to also validate your ideas early with the LLM APIs instead of over-engineering the front end. I definitely like doing front end. I did that a lot, and I kind of scrapped some components because of that, unfortunately. So you also want to trust your human intuition with building the prompt. So if something feels off, it like probably is. Unless you get to the stage where it's really hard to tell, and that's really when you want to rely on the braintrust.dev stuff, the evaluations. And definitely introduce those earlier than not, because I didn't, and it definitely drove me crazy. Because when you get into these like subtle nuances, you really don't know if your changes are improvements or regressions. Beta test early. Definitely bring on real users that have real domain knowledge, so you can refine the prompt, refine the app with their specific domain knowledge. So final takeaways. Yeah. What do you mean?
Where are you? Where are you?
Oh, I'm like beta testing now. Yeah. No, I have real people like actually testing it out. There are still some ideas that I definitely want to do, but in a nutshell, I kind of have the app figured out. It's just a matter of like, polishing it in a way. Yeah. Yeah. And some other things, but there's a lot of ideas, a lot of like weird, complexity when it comes to prompts, like AI, Gen AI stuff. It's very, very interesting. You would think that it's simple, but it's really not. There's a lot of like mixing and matching with like, kind of patterns and stuff. It's very interesting, and it's actually like not so easy to see if like you've done something wrong or not. Definitely.
Very early on with ChatGPT.
Mhm.
using GPT to generate the questions. And that was before you could be very deterministic with GPT. So I had to come up with insane prompts just to get it to return back JSON and nothing but JSON.
Wow.
So and that was only like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
You know, because I'd be like, send me a JSON of the question and the answers and all that. I'd be like, okay, here's it. And I'm like, oh, I can't parse that now. It's JSON. So thank you very much. So,
Yeah.
but one of the things I found, and I always love this, is the nicer I was with my prompts, the more responsive it was. So I'm like, well, you're very helpful. You're very nice. You're very cool. Let's do this.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So, but like now with the newer models, you don't have to do that as much. I say, nope, I want JSON. I want to give it back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Turns out the robots need validation too.
Exactly. Yes, they have emotions and feelings.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that like you don't really need to do the persona type of stuff with like, which is kind of just like gaslighting in a way. Like you know, you don't need to do that stuff with the more technical stuff. But when it comes to like more artistic stuff, it definitely like helps if you say, oh, you are an expert, you know, poet akin to the style of, you know, X. You know, it actually does make a real difference. So final takeaways. Prompt engineering matters, despite what the haters might say. So thoughtful prompts definitely equate to better AI responses. Optimizing requires domain knowledge as well as best practices. There's tools for success. Definitely read the model-specific documentation, because when you're actually like sculpting the prompts, like very subtle things do make a difference with like formatting and structuring. So you want to look at the best practices of your specific model. I use Gemini, and I recommend using Gemini as well because it's free, unlike all the other ones, because Google can do that because they're rich. So, and then evaluation tools like braintrust.dev, said it before. So, and then I'll leave it off with the future of Gen AI SaaS. So Gen AI is not just automation, it's a creative collaborator. The real opportunity isn't just automation, but how AI can augment human potential in ways we haven't fully explored yet. The companies and developers who figure out how to blend AI with human creativity and problem solving will be the ones who define the future. The future of Gen AI isn't just about smarter AI, it's about how we design AI to make people smarter. The real challenge is...
So what does it look like for the user?
Oh, for the user, it's very simple.
What does it look like? Tell me about it. Describe it.
You push a button and it gives you suggestions.
So the input for the user is just a button?
No, it's other configurations. It's like so my app specifically is like, I think Google Docs. So there's like a project, and then you have several like configurations that you set for the project.
Okay, so give me like an example of configuration.
So genre.
Okay, yeah.
And subgenre, BPM. You have themes. You have moods. You have like perspective, tense. Yeah, a lot of different things, like rhyme scheme even.
And would a user have to input each one of those things?
So I had, yeah. So that's like where I was getting at with one of the lessons. So that's where I was getting at with one of these lessons. So you have to balance like flexibility with simplicity, flexibility versus simplicity. So like I didn't want to limit the user, especially with something as like, you know, can be complicated as music. You definitely don't want to limit that, because otherwise the app is like pointless. But you also don't want to like overburden them with configurations, which is why, you know, presets are a thing. So I have a preset system. So if you don't want to go through that like struggle of like fine tuning, or you want to start at a good place and then fine tune, you can do that. And yeah, my app specifically, it like takes the context of the song that you have written so far, and then like works with that context.
Oh, so is that a possible input? So you could take what you've written so far, it could determine what the configuration might be, and then the user could verify that configuration and then continue writing?
No, that's a good idea. That's a possible idea.
Shit, I gave him an idea. God damn it.
No, I was actually thinking.
My invoice will be in today.
Yeah.
So since you're using a generalized AI to do the generation, right?
Yeah.
Is there a specific way that you're expecting it to respond? And if so, how do you deal with those cases where it doesn't respond in the exact way that you expected that you expected to? Because you were mentioning like you can't parse the things from your game, from your millionaire game, but there are still probably going to be plenty of cases where it'll return something that you didn't quite expect or it's slightly different because it's an LLM, not so much because because it's LLM, it'll respond in a way that it thinks is natural or it makes sense, but doesn't quite match exactly how you thought it was supposed to.
Yeah, so like in a nutshell, from my experience, and a lot of AI folks will attest to this, is that if your prompt is like pretty unreliable, it's kind of your fault. Like it's just the prompt's fault. So, and that comes back to iteration and like fine tuning and monitoring, evaluating. So like your prompt should be like reliable. At the end of the day, if it's a production level prompt, it should be reliable. It shouldn't really fail. And if it does fail, there should be guardrails like programmatically. AI is not a solution for like everything. It's only a solution for things that code can't solve. And that's that.
Solution for code also. Well, you can do a lot of coding in ChatGPT.
There's that. Yeah, I knew this would come up. So there's that idea that people have that like AI is going to like replace software engineers, and I just don't think that that's the case, to be honest.
Because product owners have to explicitly describe what they want, and we all know. You go to a manager, they say, I just want this. You go into it, you're going to find that you're going to get into the weeds, and then you're going to deliver something and be like, this is not what I wanted.
Well, maybe in 5 years, all these PMs are going to actually be prompt engineers.
Maybe.
That's what the PM's going to stand for.
I think that's what's going to happen is you're going to have what would normally be a software developer becoming a prompt engineer, because a lot of the individual lines of code can be generated from almost any application. Now, again, I started working with ChatGPT, and since I started working with it, it changed versions. And I don't really, to me, ChatGPT is an LLM, so I don't understand enough about what is the model. But it's enhanced significantly even since I started using it.
Oh yeah,
a year ago.
Yeah,
there's using much better code.
Yeah, I mean, there's different models. So like ChatGPT, for example, like I'm a pro user myself, so there's the O1 model, which is a lot better at coding, and that does something called chain of thought. So it kind of ponders before answering, and it actually does. And that's also what DeepSeek, is. It kind of, they did some distillation. They kind of like took the outputs of ChatGPT model and like made it way more affordable and kind of like on par with it, which is interesting. So yeah, so I mean that seems to be noteworthy, but I don't personally believe that LLMs in its like, at the end of the day, it is pattern recognition, and if open source didn't exist, like LLMs couldn't create code in the first place. So I don't think that they will get to the point, my personal opinion, I mean this is my opinion, but I don't think they're going to get to the point where like no one needs to be technical anymore, because at the end of the day, like if something wasn't done before, like then you can't do it. It can only do things that have been done before, and that's very like noteworthy. It's not going to like solve problems that have never been solved. Yeah.
You control which version of the LLM?
Yeah. If you're integrating an LLM into your app, you have access to a bunch of different config, like the model itself, as well as like secure, like kind of like some guardrail settings. I know Gemini. I'm using Gemini, but yeah, you do have access to things. It's kind of randomness as well. Yeah. The randomness in the output. Yeah. Any other questions?
This is great.